All right, welcome into another Auburn Live show. I am Justin Hokanson. Glad you are with us from auburnlive.com on 3 Sports Network on this Tuesday morning when you're listening to this and watching on YouTube now. So make sure and go to our YouTube channel and watch these. We're going to start putting these videos up and so you can listen to it on your phone in podcast form. And we're also going to do videos and shows when we have guests. We'll have them on video as well and that kind of stuff. So it's going to be awesome. So appreciate everybody joining us again. I am Justin Hokanson from auburnlive.com. For anybody that's just finding this podcast or maybe just watching us on YouTube for the first time, I've been in this industry for a while. I've worked at Rivals and 24/7 Sports, so I've been covering Auburn for the better part of a decade in some form or fashion. So if you haven't been to auburnlive.com, man, we're doing some crazy things and breaking a lot of news and have a lot of good football information, recruiting information, things like that. So make sure that you're a part of auburnlive.com. As we always do on Tuesday, I generally fly solo on Tuesdays because I generally break down what Bryan Harsin had to say on Mondays. We have a lot of guests, but Tuesday is kind of devoted to diving into what Bryan Harsin has to say during his weekly press conference, which is on Monday afternoons. So that's what we'll do this week as Auburn prepares for LSU. Before we get into Bryan Harsin, obviously, we're going to try to put a bow on this Cornelius Williams situation at Auburn. We broke the story at Auburn Live that Cornelius Williams, who was Auburn's wide receivers coach, was fired on Sunday afternoon. And so that was shocking news, obviously, really, really big shocking news. Cornelius Williams fired after 4 games at Auburn. Really, I haven't seen anything quite like it. The only thing that comes to mind is Tony Franklin in 2008 when he was let go as offensive coordinator midway through the season. So this is crazy. You know, Bryan Harsin even said on Monday he's never done anything like this, and he even said, "Look, it's not ideal," and he understands that. But for him, it's all about getting better. For him, this is a decision to make the football team better. But let's dive into that a little bit on kind of what we know. If you've been on auburnlive.com the past 2 days, you kind of know what's going on. I've tried to keep people up to date the best I can with accurate information. As far as I can tell, on Cornelius Williams, as far as I can tell, this is a performance-based decision. I have not been able to confirm any type of rumor that there was any altercation or argument or anything like that. I think that it was an accumulation of things, and Bryan Harsin just felt like he had to make a move. From talking to sources, it very much sounds like you got to take all of this into context. Okay, first of all, Cornelius Williams was not the first choice for Bryan Harsin. Probably wasn't the second or third choice. And so I think that's an important thing to remember that. Cornelius Williams came in after 6 seasons at Troy and had done a good job there. He's an Alabama kid, went to Hoover High School in Birmingham. Good coach, good recruiter. And so, you know, I think you got to remember that fact that he wasn't Bryan Harsin's first choice. Okay. Then you factor in that Bryan Harsin brought with him Eric Keesaw. Now, Eric Keesaw was the offensive coordinator at Boise State last season and had been with Harsin the last 4 years at Boise State. Keesaw also has experience as an offensive coordinator at Fresno State in Colorado and was an offensive analyst under Lane Kiffin at Alabama in the 14-15 season, I believe. Actually roomed with Lane Kiffin, and they watched a lot of film together. So he's got a relationship with Lane Kiffin. That's the other important thing to remember here. So Keesaw's brought in, his role at Auburn was basically the chief offensive analyst. And he's been basically the assistant receivers coach. Okay. So he's been right there coaching the receivers with Cornelius. Cornelius is the man. He's been coaching them, but Keesaw's been there as well. And so those are 2 important factors I think to remember. 1, Cornelius Williams was not the first choice. And 2, Bryan Harsin brought with him a trusted offensive coach who has coached the position and coordinated an offense and has been at Boise and knows how Bryan Harsin wants to work as a program and as an offense. I think those two things, now that we know Cornelius Williams has been fired, I think when you look back, I think Cornelius Williams was in a tough spot. I think that Cornelius Williams was in a spot where, he's trying to learn Bobo's offense and learn Harsin's offense and figure out what Harsin wants from his wideouts, um, and do all that. And Keesaw's standing right there in the background. So I think Keesaw's presence put more pressure on Cornelius Williams than maybe a normal assistant might have. Okay. Now we get to the actual performance. The receivers have not played great. They've dropped 9 passes in 4 games. We've seen it. Hasn't been great. Look, if you go back to the beginning of fall camp for Bryan Harsin, he has harped on the wideouts consistently in terms of wanting more consistency from them, wanting alignment to be correct, spacing to be correct. I mean, he wants his wideouts to be professionals in everything they do. He wants every detail correct from those wideouts in terms of where you line up, how you run the route. Make sure if you're going to cut on this exact yard line. Everything has to be perfect. Okay. And that probably comes from one, Bryan Harsin being a detail oriented guy, and two, Bryan Harsin's a former quarterback. So he wants his wideouts doing the right thing. So over the last 6 weeks, we've heard Bryan Harsin harp on the receiver position. And it's been clear. I've said this on this podcast and other places. It's clear he hasn't been thrilled with the development of that position. Then you fast forward to Akron. Okay, after Akron, there were some positive things said. Harsin liked what he saw. Unfortunately, that didn't last. And after the Penn State game, our sources tell us that's kind of when this relationship between Harsin and Cornelius Williams really took a turn for the worse. I think that Harsin probably had been thinking about, what am I going to do at the receiver position? I'm not getting what I want from that position for a while. And I think the Penn State game, there was multiple drops. After that game, Harsin talked about wanting more from guys around the quarterback position. He made sure to say that we need other guys to step up, and he pretty much was talking about the receivers in that football game. Okay. Our sources say that from that point on, the relationship between Williams and Harsin wasn't great, a little bit cold. And at that point, Cornelius Williams, I think, was thinking, am I going to have a job? I mean, it was that kind of feeling. Then you have Georgia State happen. Auburn nearly loses that game. Again, receivers are not making a big impact in that football game. Even on the last drive, if you go back and watch the last drive, there's a play where Kalen Newton is running on the field late because they don't have enough players on the field, and it turned out to be receivers. They didn't have enough receivers. Well, that's on the coach. I mean, you got to have your guys ready. So I think that game, everything, I think that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And Bryan Harsin pulled the trigger and let him go. I really don't think there was anything sinister. I don't think there was anything shady. I think the presence of Eric Keesaw made this a move that Bryan Harsin could make right now. I think if Eric Keesaw's not there, I'm not sure that you can make the move in the middle of the season. I mean, who are you going to promote to coach the receivers if you don't have a guy there that you trust in your offense, like Keesaw? I don't know. And so that's why I think it was an odd situation, but it was also unique to have somebody like Eric Keesaw basically as a backup that you could always go to. So is it odd? Yeah, it's crazy. Bryan Harsin said on Monday, he praised Cornelius Williams. He said he did a good job for us. He's a good man, good family. But what Bryan Harsin said was, he said there was obviously a decision made that I felt like we needed. It's not ideal. I understand that. I don't take that lightly. It impacts a lot of things, and I'm aware of that. I just felt like it was something we needed to do to move forward. And he made it very clear this is about getting better, period. So, I think there's a lot of factors that went into this decision. It wasn't just some rumored blow up in the locker room. I mean, that wouldn't make sense. And honestly, Bryan Harsin doesn't come off as the kind of coach that would have a disagreement with his assistant and then fire. That doesn't seem like Bryan Harsin anyway. So I think it was a combination of Eric Keesaw's presence, and I think Bryan Harsin brought Eric Keesaw to Auburn ultimately to be on the staff in a permanent role. He didn't bring Eric Keesaw to be an analyst. Eric Kiesau's been an offensive coordinator in big-time college football. He's been with Harsin for 4 years. He didn't go from being OC to come to Auburn to be an analyst. My guess is Harsin said, look, come with me. Get used to the SEC. Let's put you as an analyst role for a year, and then we're going to find a place for you. And I think the struggles through the first few games at receiver and the disappointment and maybe Cornelius and how he was developing those guys and those guys being so off kiltered. I think he just decided, hey, it's an opportunity, but why not now? I can put a guy in there that I trust. I was going to probably try to find a place for him anyway. We gave Cornelius Williams a shot. It didn't work, and he made the move right before conference season versus going all season. If you're sitting there and you're like, well, we're going to make the move anyway. If you get to the point where you think, okay, this isn't maybe what I thought it was going to be, just pull the Band-Aid off. And that's what he did. Is it unique? Yep. It's odd. Yep. But I really think that when you break it down, there's a lot of things that make sense about the move. There's a lot of things that kind of do make sense about it. And so that's kind of the gist of it. I just sort of wanted to go over the whole Cornelius Williams saga because it's been crazy. Hopefully Cornelius Williams lands on his feet. He's a good young coach, and he can recruit. He's a good recruiter. He'll be fine. I think he'll be fine. But it'll be interesting to see now, what does Auburn look like against LSU, especially at the wideout position. Mainly, do other receivers play? Because that's the one thing we're not sure about is why didn't Xavier Capers play more? Why didn't Elijah Canyon play more? Those two specifically. Those are big, talented, athletic guys. Now, if they're not doing their part in practice, okay. We just don't know. You see Canyon make a play at the end of that game. You've seen Capers make plays. Those guys are big targets, and they would help a quarterback in terms of moving the ball downfield. And so you got to wonder why they'd ever had opportunities. And so we'll see if maybe there's a different receiver rotation potentially too. That could also point towards maybe there was something. If there's a different rotation, maybe that's another thing that you can look at and say maybe that was on Cornelius. Maybe he was caught on some guys or too hard on some other guys or who knows what. So that kind of hopefully that kind of wraps up that saga. Auburn will move on. Cornelius Williams is out. Eric Kiesau's in, and Auburn will move on as they play LSU. All right, let's dive into what Bryan Harsin had to say on Monday. Most of it centered around TJ Finley and Bo Nix, obviously. No starter's been named. Disregard the depth chart that has Bo Nix as the starter. No starter's been named. I would be surprised if a starter is publicly named before the game. I don't know what benefit that would be to name a starter. This isn't fall camp. To me, you just go in and you start a guy. I don't know. I don't think we'll know until right before game time. The one thing that Bryan Harsin has said that I think is interesting because you don't hear it said a lot, or I certainly haven't heard it say this way, but he's made it a point to say, hey, the quarterback is no different than any other position. You got to prepare. There's no, quarterback, I understand it's a little different because that's that position, and generally you go into the game knowing you're the starter. But ultimately, you're on the football team like everybody else, and you got to prepare, and you got to earn that role. You don't just get to, walk through practice that week because you're the starter. And so Bryan Harsin's made it a point to say, hey, those guys got to prepare and just like anybody else. And so that's what he's asking his quarterbacks to do this week. He's saying both those guys need to be ready to go. Both those guys need to prepare like they're going to play. Who starts, we're not sure. Like I said, I don't think you're going to know. He praised TJ Finley for his performance on Saturday, said, hey, he was poised. He came in prepared and ready, and he earned that opportunity. I really had a lot of good things to say about TJ, and I think that's on purpose. I think he didn't want this to be about Bo Nix being benched. I think he wanted to say, yeah, okay, we needed a spark. I needed to pull Bo Nix. But TJ also has done things to earn the role. I think he wanted to make sure that people understood that it's not like TJ just got to play by default. Like Nix wasn't doing a good job and we had to put somebody in. He wanted to make sure and give TJ Finley praise for preparing and being ready to play and making sure that people understood that he earned that opportunity. Not just, well, we pulled Nix and somebody had to play it. And so I think that was important to TJ's confidence and maybe keeping a little pressure off of Bo Nix and making it just about Bo. Bo Nix was on and made some public comments to the media on Monday. He was on the next round out of Birmingham, and he talked about the decision. He said he was frustrated. He said he was pissed at being pulled. He said that he was shocked. He didn't think he was playing that bad, and so he tried to be a good teammate. He said he kind of took himself out of, you might have seen that shot where he's sort of by himself. He said he kind of did that on purpose. He said, I didn't want to be in the middle of the action where the camera finds me and puts it on me. And he kind of was thinking if he stays away from the huddle and next to Bryan Harsin, that maybe he wouldn't be part of the story. He just kind of wanted to give some breathing room, I guess. And so, but he's, look, he's going to continue to prepare and be ready. And the story on Bo Nix is not done, I don't think. I don't know who's going to start this weekend, and whoever starts this weekend, I mean, could Finley start and just take off, and it be a Tom Brady, Drew Brees situation where where Bledsoe never plays again, Nix never plays again? Maybe, certainly possible, but I don't think the story is completely written on Bo Nix. I think he'll have opportunities again, and I think he'll stay as ready as he can be. So no starter is going to be named. We'll find out later in the week. Probably not. Probably on Saturday we'll probably find out who's going to play quarterback at that position. Again, on the coaching change, Bryan Harsin talked about that. He said, "Look, we need to improve. Our goal is every week to improve." He said that's been the message from day one. We make decisions on improvement, and nothing else. And he just said we need to figure out what kind of program we want to be, and that's how we need to make decisions. So that's why he changed out Cornelius Williams for Eric Kiesau. Here's what he had to say about Eric Kiesau, by the way, Bryan Harsin. He said, "I've known him for a long time. He's a good teacher. He understands that what we want to do and how we want to do it. He understands why we're doing it." He said, "Eric brings experience and a level of teaching that I feel like can improve our room and help those guys understand what they're trying to accomplish." He said he's a good technician. He's very detailed. And he said that's one thing I'd describe him as, a very detailed coach. He has a plan. He has a vision. What stands out about me in him describing Eric Kiesau is he might as well be describing himself, which again goes back to bringing Kiesau on, and just from talking to people and my own sense of the situation, it's pretty clear he wanted Eric Kiesau to be a part of the staff eventually. And it's also pretty clear why he pulled the trigger to get rid of Cornelius Williams, because he has a lot of faith, clearly, in Eric Kiesau. I mean, everything he just said about Eric Kiesau is really Bryan Harsin. So he sees a lot of himself in Eric Kiesau. So it sounds like I don't think Auburn's going to suffer at receiver. I mean, they weren't getting great production anyway. So it's not like it's going to get worse. And if there were alignment issues and spacing issues, things like that, ultimately that's coaching. Look, Cornelius could be sitting back there going, I did everything I could. The guys just don't pick it up. Maybe. But ultimately that comes back to coaching. It just does. Bryan Harsin was asked about would there be a different game plan depending on the quarterback. And he kind of shot that down. He said that's pretty much impossible to try to develop two completely different game plans. I mean, that's asking a lot. He said we need to have a game plan that everybody can execute, not just two guys. What he did say was he was asked about the game plan. He said, in general, they said, do you have to change things for Bo Nix and TJ Finley? And Bryan Harsin said, well, not necessarily. He goes, but in general, we have to change something. He goes, let's start there. He goes, we got to change something because we got to put points on the board. And which is obviously true. So I don't know what kind of different game plan you're going to get. Look, Nix and TJ Finley they're both mobile. They both have good arm strength. So I don't know. Maybe RPO stuff is probably the only thing. If there was any RPO game, I could see Nix running RPO. I don't think Finley's going to run RPO stuff. He didn't have that kind of burst like Nix does to be able to run that. But other than that, play action, I formation run, zone run, and then slinging it around. I don't see a lot that'll be different necessarily. I mean, TJ Finley's got a great arm. He throws a great football, and so but Nix has got a good arm strength too. So I don't think that necessarily the play calling will be that much different, other than maybe you don't see RPO, which is something I would see more with Bo Nix than TJ Finley. One of the other things that Bryan Harsin talked about was Auburn's inability to score in the red zone. Look, Auburn, I mean, not only are they not scoring, but it really comes down to the red zone. If you go back to Penn State, they had to kick 2 field goals. And then you look at Georgia State, they kicked 4 field goals. Didn't score an offensive touchdown against Georgia State until 45 seconds left in the game. And Bryan Harsin harped on that. He said, "We have to score in the red zone." He goes, "Everybody in offense knows we have to put it. We have to put it in the end zone. We have to score touchdowns. You have to smell blood and want to get into the end zone." Auburn ranked 63rd nationally in scoring touchdowns in the red zone. They've been in the red zone 14 times and they have 9 touchdowns and 4 field goals. So it's just not good enough. It's just not even close to good enough in terms of where you need to be to score and to win. And so that was something that Bryan Harsin harped on. And it makes sense. Look, Auburn can run the football pretty well. They can't throw the ball. So if you think about what happens when you get in the red zone, the field collapses. The ability to run the ball as you get closer to the goal line is harder. That ability becomes tougher. And so then you've got to either be able to really execute in the run game, or you've got to be accurate and make good throws. And that hasn't been there. So it makes total sense that Auburn's stalled in the red zone right now. They have a decent enough offense to move between the 20s at times, but the red zone, they don't have the execution or the playmakers at wideout to stretch things out so that they can still run or make a throw to a big time wideout. They don't have it right now. So they got to figure that out. Bryan Harsin talked about the LSU game a little bit, expects it to be a physical game. Max Johnson, good quarterback for LSU, good passing game. You know what surprised me was that LSU's rushing attack is 13th in the SEC right now. They're only averaging 80 yards a game. That's unusual for an LSU football team to be 13th in rushing. So let's keep an eye on that. Auburn's been good against the run, except for Saturday. Well, I should say, except for the first half Saturday. Once they got their heads screwed on straight, Jacoby McClain returned. Auburn shut that down. So I think Auburn's still a pretty good rush defense team. So again, I think this is going to be similar to Penn State. I think Auburn will contain the run decently, and it's going to be what adjustments has Derek Mason made on that defense? Is he going to sit back and play zone? Does he think that he just needs to execute better, or is he going to make adjustments and bring more pressure? Because Max Johnson's a talented quarterback. Butte, their receiver at LSU, is fantastic. And so if you sit back and try to do that LSU scheme again, it's not going to be much different than the Penn State game. They're gonna throw for 300. And so Auburn's really got to figure that out. I think they'll do some different things. I don't think you'll see the same thing, but hopefully you allow Roger McCreary and Nehemiah Pritchett to be more aggressive. So we'll see. We'll see how that kind of plays out. Also talked about LSU's defense, first in the league in sacks. It's not what you want to hear if you're Auburn and you're coming off a game where you struggled to run the ball on Georgia State. You struggled to protect Bo Nix. He was pressured 10 times, sacked twice. So an LSU defense that's been coming after the quarterback, and now you potentially have a brand new quarterback in there. So, we'll see. That offensive line for Auburn is going to have to really step up and help Finley and get that running game going in Baton Rouge. So we'll see how that's going. But that's kind of the high points of what Bryan Harsin had to say on Monday. Most of it, obviously, like we talked about, centered around the quarterback battle between Finley and Bo Nix. And I call it a battle because I don't really like the controversy word. I don't necessarily think it's a controversy. I think that this has been a quarterback battle for a long time. And I also don't think Bo Nix is going anywhere. I don't think TJ Finley is that much better that it won't still be a battle. Finley could play at LSU and play the whole game. And I still think it could be a battle because I think they're pretty close. And I think Bryan Harsin puts a lot of importance on practice, preparing, watching film, and doing all those little things. So, I mean, if Finley has a good week, and let's say they go to LSU, lose, but Finley plays the whole game, doesn't play bad, they come back in the next week, and Bo Nix just starts having amazing weeks of practice. He'll be right there. He'll be right there, and he'll have an opportunity to start the second Finley is maybe not doing great. So I think it's still a battle unless, excuse me, unless one of them just takes off. Either Finley takes this thing and runs with it, or Finley goes in and starts and struggles worse than Nix, and Nix gets put back in and gets his head on straight and all of a sudden starts playing well. So anyway, I think there's opportunities there for this still to be a quarterback battle. And so we'll kind of see what happens. So that kind of is a rundown of what Bryan Harsin said on Monday. Real quick, well, let's also talk about. I had an opportunity to talk to Bruce Pearl on Monday morning. Bruce Pearl, Charles Barkley did a golf event in support of Auburn basketball. The athletics department raised a lot of money, and we had a chance to talk. Excuse me. We had a chance to talk to Bruce Pearl a little bit. Talked about his team. They start practice on Tuesday, and so. Um, young team, a lot of transfers coming in. Alan Flanagan, he updated that situation and said that it's a serious injury. And so we'll see how that's coming along. It's going to be mid-December for Alan Flanagan. Had some good things to say about Chris Moore and Devin Cambridge and Wendell Green as well. Chris Moore's a guy to watch out for. He's a good spot-up shooter from three. He's changed his body. He could be a really good player. And Charles Barkley, obviously had some really cool things to say, including a guy who's been to the Olympics, a guy who's an NBA MVP, NBA Hall of Famer. And Charles Barkley said, I've had an amazing, blessed life, but Auburn going to the Final Four is probably my greatest sports experience. So pretty cool moment for Charles Barkley in what that run from Auburn basketball meant to him. Also asked him about Jabari Smith. He said he hasn't met Jabari or seen him in person play, but he's heard a lot of good things. And he's a terrific young player. So I'm curious to see if we can get some more thoughts from Barkley on Jabari Smith as the season goes on. But we'll have more on Auburn basketball this week at auburnlive.com as practice gets going. And so make sure and check that out. But make sure at auburnlive.com, football, recruiting news, basketball, recruiting news, team news, a great message board. We have absolutely been cooking the last 24 hours with information and intel. So make sure at auburnlive.com and go subscribe. We'll talk to more players. We'll have guests on every day. And so this is kind of your home, if either in podcast form or watching on YouTube, rewatching these things. We'll have more guests on. It'll be fun. So appreciate everybody joining us. If you want more on what Bryan Harsin said, go to auburnlive.com and make sure that that's your home as Auburn prepares to play LSU this weekend, 8:00 in Death Valley, 8:00 at night. ESPN game should be a really fun show, really fun game. I appreciate everybody joining us. auburnlive.com. Until next time, we're out. See ya.